Welcome to the Lancaster Patriot Podcast. My name is Chris, and it is Monday, September 11th, in the year of our Lord, 2023. Top news for you today begins in New Mexico, where Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham has suspended the right to carry firearms in and around Albuquerque following the shooting deaths of 3 children, including an 11-year-old boy killed outside a minor league baseball stadium last week, according to ABC News. Now, the governor issued a 30-day ban on open and concealed carrying of firearms in Albuquerque, the most populated city in New Mexico. The ban also reaches some of the surrounding area. Now, a day prior, Lujan Grisham, that's the governor, declared gun violence a statewide public health emergency, citing a statistic that shows the rate of gun deaths in New Mexico increased 43% from 2009 to 2018. Lujan Grisham is a Democrat, and she believes banning firearms, at least for 30 days, will keep people safe from criminals who don't follow those laws anyway. She said this, quote, "When New Mexicans are afraid to be in crowds, to take their kids to school, to leave a baseball game, when their very right to exist is threatened by the prospect of violence at every turn, something is very wrong," end quote. Well, something is indeed very wrong in America, but the solution is not to keep the righteous from carrying a gun to protect their kids when leaving a baseball game. Now, the governor's order is not without its opponents. In New Mexico, many top-ranking Republicans in the state Senate, for example, denounced the order. And over the weekend, the National Association for Gun Rights filed a lawsuit against the governor and the state's health secretary. The lawsuit claims that the orders violate the Second Amendment. And they said this, quote, "The state must justify the carry prohibition by demonstrating that it is consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. But it is impossible for the state to meet this burden because there is no such historical tradition of firearms regulation in this nation," end quote. That was from the lawsuit filed by the National Association for Gun Rights. Now, the sheriff in Bernalillo County, John Allen, he's also a Democrat. Even he expressed some reservations about this order. He said, "While I understand and appreciate the urgency, the temporary ban challenges the foundation of our Constitution, which I swore an oath to uphold. I am wary of placing my deputies in positions that could lead to civil liability conflicts, as well as the potential risks posed by prohibiting law-abiding citizens from their constitutional right to self-defense." Of course, Allen in this case is correct. How can you prevent the law-abiding citizens from protecting themselves against miscreants and criminals who don't care about gun bans and gun laws? This reminds us of the doctrine of nullification, which is becoming increasingly more important as we have more and more man-made laws put out by these governors and legislators and so forth. You'll remember, I guess it was a year or so, actually the beginning of this year, I think, when the governor of Illinois issued some sort of order saying you have to register your rifles with the state, and many sheriffs said, we're not going to enforce this. So again, nullification, the idea that the lesser magistrate refuses to enforce a wicked, unjust order or even law, is an important concept that we really need to understand. Now, meanwhile, this is happening in New Mexico. Here in Lancaster County, the sentencing for Reuben King, an Amish dairy farmer who faces a potential of 5 years in federal prison. His sentencing has been moved to November. Now, King was convicted for selling firearms without a federal license, despite there being no clear federal statute requiring him to acquire said license. Again, he was selling rifles and shotguns, mostly to his neighbors, Amishman who are using them for hunting. And the ATF and the Pennsylvania State Police came into Reuben King's residence, did undercover operations to buy firearms from him. And then they came with a vague order saying, if you keep selling firearms without the license, you may face prosecution. And they ended up getting Reuben King, and now he faces potentially 5 years in prison. If you want more information on Reuben King, go to givesendgo.com/Reuben King. That's REUBENKING. Givesendgo.com/Reuben King. Well, about a week and a half ago, Danilo Cavalcante, a 34-year-old man, escaped from a Chester County jail in southeastern Pennsylvania. Now, Cavalcante was in prison for murder, having been convicted recently of killing his ex-girlfriend in front of her children in 2021. Now, Cavalcante was also wanted for an alleged 2017 killing in Brazil. He was sentenced to life in prison and was awaiting a transfer to state prison when he made his daring escape. Cavalcante apparently made his escape by scaling a wall, climbing over razor wire, and then jumping from a roof. According to NBC 10, the escaped murderer has been spotted in various places in southeastern Pennsylvania, including East Nantmeal Township, Phoenixville, and Longwood Gardens. A spokesman for the PA State Police said yesterday that Cavalcante stole an unlocked dairy delivery van, which had the keys inside it, on Saturday night. Bailey's Dairy, located in Westchester, Pennsylvania, posted on social media on Sunday, quote, "Friends, our delivery van was stolen last night between 7 and 10 p.m. while we were still here working. It is believed that Cavalcante used it to flee the Pocopson area. We are still working with law enforcement to help with the investigation. We really do not have any other information at this time and are just as disappointed as everyone that he broke through the perimeter in Longwood. We appreciate the support of the community and continuing efforts of law enforcement," end quote. Cavalcante is approximately 5 feet tall and 120 pounds with black hair, and he does remain at large. The whole ordeal should remind us of the uselessness of the prison system. A convicted murderer should be executed according to biblical law. Instead, how many millions of dollars are spent caging up men like Cavalcante, and now how many millions of dollars will be spent trying to recapture him? Here is man-made law and man-made justice on full display. And for a nation such as ours, which does not deal with murderers, whether that's Brazilian thugs like Cavalcante or American butchers at Planned Parenthoods, murderers roaming our nation is no less than we deserve for our sin. May God have mercy on us and grant us repentance and justice according to his law. Now, we can be thankful that Cavalcante is at least not at large in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where the governor is attempting to disarm her people. Of course, men like Cavalcante would be happy to find themselves surrounded by unarmed people, unable to defend themselves. Well, in Virginia, we have an update on the case involving Scott Smith, the man who was arrested for obstruction of justice and disorderly conduct. The Daily Wire reports that Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin on Sunday granted an absolute pardon to the father who was arrested at a school board meeting after the superintendent lied about his daughter's rape by a skirt-wearing boy. Now, Scott Smith, he was charged with obstruction of justice and disorderly conduct stemming from an incident during a school board meeting which took place shortly after Smith's 15-year-old daughter was assaulted in her school's bathroom by a boy dressed as a girl. One of those charges against Smith was dropped, but the other was set to go to trial until Youngkin pardoned Smith. Now, the board meeting, you may remember it from, I believe it was 2021. It got very emotional. There were heated exchanges between Smith and others, and eventually Smith was hauled off by police. Now, Youngkin issued the pardon on Sunday, and he said in a statement, quote, "Scott Smith is a dedicated parent who's faced unwarranted charges in his pursuit to protect his daughter. Scott's commitment to his child despite the immense obstacles is emblematic of the parental empowerment movement that started in Virginia." Now, I do have a few things to say about that parental empowerment movement, but first, a Commonwealth attorney who was originally in charge of prosecuting the case called Youngkin's pardon a political stunt, claiming that it was about Youngkin gaining something and not about the Smith family at all. Youngkin issued the pardon just days before he was scheduled to speak in Leesburg about parental rights in the government educational system. Now, I do not want to make light at all of what happened to Scott Smith's daughter. That was an evil, wicked thing. And apparently, the young man who did it went to another school and assaulted another girl. Now, if we had a just system and we had biblical law, we might be looking at a case of the incorrigible son here and potential execution. It is a wicked thing that happened to Smith's daughter, and I am not making light of that. But I do want to point out that Smith and so many others are sort of burying the lead here when it comes to the nonsense in the government schools. I want to read a comment from a YouTube video about Smith that kind of captures this problem. This is from someone who supports Scott Smith and what he did speaking out on behalf of his daughter who was assaulted in this school. This is what this man said. He said, "If I can't defend my daughter lawfully, I will risk it all to defend her unlawfully. Don't mess with someone's children because their children may be their only source of happiness." Now, again, if Scott Smith wants to defend his daughter, and I have another thing I want to read from Smith here. He said this. Smith said, "My daughter has been constantly bullied and berated by her peers." Now, if this is the case, if this is what's happening in the government school systems, which of course it is, how many other assaults have happened in Virginia schools and Pennsylvania schools and across the nation? But if you really want to protect your children, then don't send them to the state, right? If we really want to defend our children from wickedness, don't give them over to the state. So Glenn Youngkin talking about parental empowerment movement. If you really want to be empowered to protect your children and educate them, do not give them to the state. If you remember some of the footage of that school board meeting where Scott Smith was arrested, I mean, there are parents that are fired up. This is where, of course, you had the charges of, these are domestic terrorists, of parents going to these school board meetings and expressing their frustration with what's happening in their schools and how these environments are unsafe, and we're going to come and we're going to protect our kids. But again, how much has the government school system changed from that? If these parents are really serious about being empowered to educate their children, as Youngkin says, I'm all about parental empowerment, and if they really want to protect and defend their children, then they need to get them out of the government schools. How can you send your children to the state to be educated and then complain when that situation, that environment is unsafe? Again, it's a broken system. If Smith and the parents like him truly want to protect their children, they need to remove them from the government school system and bring education back to where it belongs, and that is the home. This will never change as long as we have a state-sponsored, state-funded, really by the forced taxation of Americans, anti-Christian system. You can expect only more of this wickedness. And all these parents' remonstrations against, I'm going to come in and speak up for my child's rights. It's all pretty vain when at the end of the day, you are giving your children over to the state 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for 12 years. Which leads to our final story today, and that is Urban Air, a trampoline and adventure park in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, has ruffled the feathers of some local homeschoolers. A recent social media post from Urban Air Adventure Park, Lancaster, announced an Educators Appreciation Day for September 8th. So this would have been a few days ago. The post said, just bring a valid ID as proof of educator status and receive 2 free platinum entry tickets for the day. Now, the post raised questions from homeschooling moms who then asked if homeschoolers were included. Urban Air Lancaster responded, quote, unfortunately, this offer is limited to educators that are dedicated to helping the entire community, end quote. Now, it appears that the post was actually deleted by Urban Air, though the promotion appears to have still ran, and other appreciation days are scheduled for September for healthcare workers, first responders, and sanitation and utility workers. In response to a question about whether social workers are considered as first responders, Urban Air Lancaster wrote, quote, they would be considered healthcare workers and are absolutely a part of this, end quote. So government social workers are healthcare workers, but home educators are not educators, at least according to Urban Air Lancaster. Now, I think Urban Air is free to give discounts to whomever they want, based on whatever criteria they want. I don't want the civil government getting involved in anything like this. They could choose to give discounts to people with blonde hair and blue eyes for all I care, and I think the government should still not get involved. Of course, people can choose to boycott the company, which may in fact be a good option. But this does reveal the mindset of modern America. Homeschooling parents are not viewed as serving the community, whereas state-sponsored government school teachers are. Of course, I would argue it's the contrary. The government school educators, though there may be some good ones in there, overall are furthering the statist and humanistic agenda of the public school system and are destroying our communities, our states, and our nation. As it concerns education, this story and also the shenanigans in Loudoun County, Virginia, reveal that our only hope for renewal and reformation in this county and nation is to return the education to the home, where Christian character can be taught and our children can be protected. Or we can keep having the statists educate our children. So then we can raise up more governors to ban guns and magistrates who will ignore biblical law by putting murderers in prison and then forcing us to pay for it, and apparently have a hard time catching them when they escape. Now here's some comments from homeschoolers in Lancaster County in response to Urban Air's rejection of homeschooling parents as educators because they don't help the entire community. Someone said, wow, I guess they have absolutely no clue how much homeschool moms really do benefit the community and the world by choosing to teach their children. Another post said, you're not an indoctrinator, so you don't qualify. Another one said, they mean those who are getting paid to teach according to a set of guidelines, or at least those getting paid as teachers. Unpaid teachers do not qualify. Others, however, said, it's not that big of a deal what Urban Air did. One person said, kind of surprised by these responses. I choose to give Urban Air grace and think it's very generous they are giving free tickets away to educators. They might have been able to phrase it better, but I don't think they are wrong to say that school teachers are helping the entire community. And another person said, they usually have a separate homeschool discount or days. Now, in any case, the social media post by Urban Air Lancaster has lost them some business by insinuating that homeschool parents do not benefit the entire community. Now, perhaps it was simply a poor word choice, but it's not surprising that social workers and public school teachers are recognized while homeschoolers are not. In a statist society, the state becomes God, and those who are serving the state and working for the state are recognized, whereas those people and parents who say, I'm not going to bow to the state, I'm not going to give my children to the state, I'm not going to rely on the state for education, for healthcare, those people are recognized as the pariahs, as part of the problem. And until parents like Scott Smith and companies like Urban Air recognize that, we are going to continue to have the same problems in this nation because we are going to keep educating the next generation to further statism and humanism. Well, that's it for today. For more information about the Lancaster Patriot, go to thelancasterpatriot.com. If you would like to support the work we are doing here, visit patreon.com/the Lancaster Patriot. That's patreon.com/the Lancaster Patriot. You can sign up to become a patron and get bonus content, exclusive access, and much more. So again, thank you for listening. Until next time, remember Christ, not the state, is king.